business systems are conservative, right? We create a system to keep things going predictably in a certain direction. Human systems are creative. We're chaotic, we're messy, but that's also where the potential is. And so business systems are designed to contain things, but we don't want to do that to human beings. Sure, we want some predictability and output, sure. But if that's all we're getting, we're not getting the whole person.
This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast where we talk to HR innovators about all things people leadership. If you're looking for places to find about new ways to think about the world of work, this is the podcast for you. Please subscribe from your favorite podcast listening platform today and leave us a review. Rebel on, HR Rebels. Welcome back, Rebel HR listeners. Extremely excited for our guest today. With us, we have Heather Marasse. She has been in business for over 25 years in business and management consulting. She works with a number of really large organizations to help them figure out meaningful and productive paths to action while strengthening the human side of their business. Welcome to the show, Heather. Extremely excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I can already tell that this is going to be a really good conversation. And when the opportunity presented itself to meet with you here, I jumped at the chance because I think that some of the work that you're doing in your space is really critical. And so today we're going to be talking all about how being human is good for business. So before we jump into that, I'd like to just understand a little bit more about your background and what got you interested in this topic and this focus.
Well, my background is in business. I was in marketing and sales support. And about 14 years in, I started to realize I was far more interested in the human side of the business than some of the more product development, new product issues that were next in my career path. And I realized my fascination with what it takes to get work done amongst my fellow colleagues was an area that I wanted to study more. I was just fascinated by human beings, myself included.
Same here, and I think it's one of those things where, I got into the business world and then I just kind of got fascinated with, for me, it was how to lead others. Because I wasn't very good at it and I thought I was, it was like this hubris. And I'm like, well, okay, how do I get good? And I realized the way you get good is by understanding others, right? And understanding how the brain works. So you've been doing business and management consulting for years. You've worked with a ton of really, really large clients. When was the awakening for you that the humanity was good for business? What was kind of that aha moment for you?
Well, I think it was like you. I got promoted to a level where what I knew and, my brilliance didn't matter all that much to the people who were working for me. And I noticed that I was trying to help them, and they were so gracious and tolerant of my misses. Really, I was not being helpful, and yet they still let me be with them and work with them. And I started to realize what they need from me, I'm not giving them. So what is that? And I started to get very curious, first about my own self, like what do I need here? And I started to realize I need to understand better myself and how people work together and what it is that a leader provides beyond knowing the business, the nuts and bolts of the business. There's something here. There's an invisible element that I want to learn more about. And that's what took me on a path that started to understand things like self-awareness and developing oneself from a leadership perspective, not just a management perspective, learning about the how and why, not just the what. Yeah. It's all about being human.
Absolutely. And I think I can guarantee you that many of our listeners are nodding right now, with this podcast, because it's one thing to be really technically proficient at a job that you do.
Right.
It's a whole nother thing to influence and inspire and engage other people who may
Yes.
not think the way you think or feel the way you feel about what you're asking them to do. So as you think about kind of that, that introspection and the kind of the personal development that is natural as we think in these terms, where would you recommend somebody start? Once somebody's kind of had this awakening, where do you go from there? What recommendations do you have for us there?
Well, I really excellent place to start is to hire a coach, to work with a leadership coach who can introduce you to learning about yourself, learning about how humans work, and to be a safe place for you to grow and explore places where you feel vulnerable and unequipped. They can point you in the right direction to learn what you need to learn, but they're also a safe space to kind of unravel some of the questions you have and find a place to get them answered. Often you can answer them yourself, but you didn't realize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's one of those things that I'm pretty passionate about. And whether it's a coach or it's a group that you're a part of, maybe it's just maybe you have a mentor. But, it can be really, really isolating to be in human resources or just to be in leadership in general.
Yes.
And you can't do it in a vacuum, right? I mean, there's no learning that really works well when you just kind of sit there in space and, think about it.
Right. So true. I like what you said. One of my business partners, Wendy Apple, has a quote she uses. It takes two to know one. It's hard to see myself without some reflection. And so that's where mentoring, coaching, or groups who are in a learning program together, or even a really great team that you're a member of, where the guards come down and you're starting to realize you're all developing something exciting together, not just what you're working on, but a way of working, and you're learning things about yourselves. So it's the whole opportunity to grow in partnership and relationship with others.
Absolutely. I want to kind of focus on one of the comments that you make, because I think it's a really important point, and that's you phrased it as, the guards come down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that can be really, really tough, especially in a workplace culture where authenticity isn't maybe appreciated as much, or or somebody just isn't comfortable doing that. So as we think about it in the organizational context, how do we think about influencing cultures and organizations to allow for that space, kind of that humanity to come through into the workplace?
Right. Well, what's key is to start uncovering the potential that people have. People bring a lot of potential to work, and unless we're safe, unless we feel like it's safe to be our whole selves, you're not going to get everything they've got to give. And the only renewable resource in any organization is it's human beings. Everything else gets spent. But what renews human beings is the opportunity to learn and grow. And so that's why it's so important to invest in your people, invest in them, not just in the hard skills, as they typically are called, but also in, you probably hate this term as much as I do, but the soft skills, because those are the hardest skills. It's the intangibles. It's the, learning about ourselves and what kind of habitual barriers show up when we're trying to get work done together. And why is that? And to understand our humanity actually helps us get better work done.
We'll be back after a quick break.
And so used to having
everything in front of them right away that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And you know, this is being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, you know the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
Yeah, we don't have time to have a a conversation about soft skills and that phrase that makes it makes it feel like they're unimportant, because I mean every single leader that is trying to hire right now, I have yet to meet one that says, I really don't want somebody that can communicate well. I don't need that, or I don't need someone that can work well with others, or I don't need someone that can follow directions, the first time give. Like, what is soft about those things? Those are just requirements. Those are necessary, and in my opinion, probably more critical than some of the technical stuff. As long as somebody has, the baseline understanding of some of the functions that they need to execute, if they have a willingness to learn and the quote soft skills to learn what they need to learn, then I'll hire that person all day long versus the jerk that can't work with others, that doesn't communicate well.
Yeah, I know.
So I want to kind of take the conversation that direction. So we're starting to talk a little bit about soft skills. I'm really fascinated to learn more about your approach into coaching, because I know some of the work that you've done has really started to focus on the therapeutic approach and thinking a little bit more broadly about coaching outside of what we would think traditionally a business coach would do. So walk us through the approach as it relates to how you look at coaching.
Okay. Well, first of all, our view of coaching is that it's not remedial. People are not broken. We're not here to fix people. As a matter of fact, human beings don't really respond well to a problem solution model. Because what you end up doing is if you're always solving problems, you just start generating an endless loop instead of what if people are whole to start with? And what's needed here is a return to wholeness. And so this started to come out more and more as the pandemic emerged, where the world changed dramatically. Stress went up exponentially. Our whole existence was under threat. We're now 2.5 years into it, so it's hard to remember, but for a while we didn't even know how it was transmitted. And we were locked down in our houses. Some people were afraid to open windows. So we went through an existential crisis. And what we started to see in our practice, both in consulting and coaching, but primarily through our coaching, one-on-one conversations, was mental health became much more of an open topic. I can't tell you how many clients we would speak to in a coaching call who would mention casually, well, when I was talking with my therapist the other day, or my wife and I were in counseling last week, and it just started to become part of the conversation. The guards went down. And we, coincidentally, had taken on our own development in a field called IFS, also known as internal family systems. And this is a therapeutic approach, a psychotherapeutic approach that treats people as whole. And we have multiple parts. When you think about it, we often will say a part of me wants to do this, but another part of me wants to do that. And what it recognizes is that inside of this multiplicity of dimensions of our personality, there's a core. And that core is who we really are. Those multiple parts emerge as coping strategies when we feel threatened or stressed. Once we start to have awareness of those parts, we can get some distance from them and not be in the grip of them put them to the side and simply be present with what's here. And a lot of mischief stops. And we just are ourselves, whole and complete. And so as we started to integrate some of the approaches that the IFS therapeutic approach brings, we're starting to have more success. And more importantly, actually, completely importantly, our clients were having more success in coping with what was in front of them. Yeah.
Most people underestimate the power of process. They stick it in the back seat and forget about it until it's too late. But they shouldn't. Processes run the world, literally all of it. Stocked supermarkets, on-time trains, and safely landing planes are all made possible by systems of intricate, interlinked processes. They are the secret sauce of every great company, and HR teams are responsible for some of the most important processes of all. Onboarding employees, building teams, crafting culture, these vital systems are the lifeblood of every organization. That's why this episode is brought to you by Process Street, the process platform of choice for HR teams around the world. Process Street is a no-code platform that lets you transform your most important HR processes into powerful workflows. Design beautiful employee onboarding experiences with extreme engagement that increases inclusion and reduces turnover. Sync tasks into Slack or Microsoft Teams, automate emails, handoffs, and so much more. Thousands of teams, large and small, trust Process Street to manage their most important people processes, like Salesforce that used Process Street to onboard all of the 3,000 Slack employees after the $27 billion acquisition. You can learn more and sign up for a free account at www.process.st. I think it's really powerful, and I sit here listening to it. My mind's going a lot of different directions, but the first direction that my mind went when you explained, people are whole to start with is, in my heart of hearts, like I know that, right? And I think that, we all know that, and we all, that's just kind of how we operate in our world. But so often in corporate America, you are just constantly judging people on their competencies or lack thereof. And to the point that you're labeling people as problem performers, or some people are higher potential than others, and are the shining stars, and we have such a tendency to like force rank, and inherently that theory or that methodology tends to kind of prompt us not to think that people are whole to start with, to think that people are missing a part, and we just need to help them, solve that missing part. So I think it's a really, for me, it's a little bit of a paradigm shift, but I think it's a really important one to think through. And I mean, I think, reflecting back on the pandemic, what's so interesting about that is I had a front row seat to people who were becoming more whole and authentic and real right in front of me, because I mean we were we were day to day operating in a state of sheer fear for safety and health of our employees.
Yes.
And I mean, if that doesn't make you real, I don't know what does.
Isn't that true?
But after it, the cohesiveness of the team was amazing, and the team that weathered through that storm together is significantly stronger than the team that went in, right? And so yes, it was human, but it was also like really, really good from a business standpoint as well. Does that reflect with what you've seen with your clients?
Yes, absolutely. What started happening is, people started to realize that their life was actually the superset and work is a subset of it. And what do I want to do with the subset? Because I spend an enormous amount of time there. And so there was self-selection happening. There was more authenticity. People were not willing to tolerate what they, would come to coaching calls with, where they were having conflicts and not sure how to address them. Courage showed up in a new way. because, hey, I am more than just this job, and life is short and precious. And so I can't play a part anymore. I have to be me. And I want to know who you are. So there was like a longing for depth of connection that we were forced into because we were actually disconnected physically. It was very interesting.
That is, it's fascinating to think about, and I think it's really important to think about that, and if you think about it from a pure business perspective, if you've got people who are like acting in their job, or they're truly just kind of playing a game and trying to fit into the mold that they think they should be into, I mean, that's a miserable experience, and eventually they're not going to do very well, right? You shouldn't want that in your organization. And so, to that point, it makes me wonder if some of the the fear and of turnover, and some of the churn that's happened in some of these roles, I actually wonder if it might actually be net benefit for maybe short-term pain for a company, and a little bit stressful certainly for an HR practitioner.
Oh, that.
But long term, it could actually be really, really good, because it could be kind of a realignment of people's priorities.
Yes.
And I actually think the companies that are responsive to this and are putting their people first and truly thinking about these things, and putting support in action for their people, and having a great culture, ultimately, I just think that's kind of how they win in this capitalist society. The best employers are ultimately going to win in this type of an environment, right?
Yeah, you don't want people playing a part of themselves. You want everything they've got to give, and we tend to give freely when we feel safe and that we're a fit with with the team we're on, right?
Absolutely. So, you alluded to this, and certainly it's an extremely critical component of anybody's performance at work. But mental health is such a critical topic, and I think it's actually now just kind of getting the the deserved recognition and support from a workplace. But over the last few years, as you've seen this in your clients, and as you've done some work with some of your some of the people that you're helping, what are some trends that you're seeing in kind of that mental health space that maybe are becoming more prevalent, and how are employers and leaders helping to address and support their employees that are dealing with these types of challenges?
Well, some of the trends we're seeing are people being more open about the mental health issues in their families, supporting their children, supporting their elders, supporting themselves. There's stigma around mental health is gradually falling. And part of that is because, again, it comes back to the problem solution model. Mental health it's such a thing. It's healthy, and it's not a problem if I'm attending to it. It's actually a holistic practice. And so for me to acknowledge that I have a teenager who's gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd and has been experimenting with drugs, so we are working with a counselor or a therapist to help our family system through this difficult time. And by the way, I may need a week off in the next month because we're going to go to a facility and, have some time as families. That sort of thing is being spoken now, in not everywhere, but certainly I'm hearing way more of it. Well, we're just seeing a lot more investment in coaching, and coaching is starting to be seen as a professional support versus a remedial support. And because when you think about it, all professionals have coaches, and most professionals also have therapists. And it's not because they have mental health problems. It's because it's a holistic approach to life. And especially when you're in a high performance game, you want all the help you can get.
Absolutely. It's funny that, and I love this problem solution model, approach, and it, and I'm partially to blame too, because I'm always I'm in the manufacturing environment, right? So it's always like
Right.
root cause analysis, 5 whys, figure out the root cause, fix the problem, and then fix it forever, and then it never comes back, right? I mean, that's ingrained in almost every aspect of corporate life, at least in the Western world. But
Yeah.
but because of that, it's you can't think about people like that, right? Like I'm talking about a process, right? And that's really what like those types of systems are intended to focus on. So often we think about that in the world of like HR, and we just try to kind of fit that, fit that type of, process into a box with a person with a talent
Yeah.
assessment. It doesn't really work, right?
It's kind of a domain error.
Yeah,
We
that's
treat
good. That's a good way.
humans we treat humans with business system logic, but business systems are preservative, right? We create a system to keep things going predictably in a certain direction. Human systems are creative. We're chaotic, we're messy, but that's also where the potential is. And so business systems are designed to contain things, but we don't want to do that to human beings. Sure, we want some predictability and output, sure. But if that's all we're getting, we're not getting the whole person.
I love this topic. It's like the difference between like, 8th grade algebra and chaos theory, right? Like people
Yeah.
people are way more complex than,
Mm-hmm.
this plus y plus x minus this equals whatever, right? It's like it's just much more complex. The other thing that prompted, some thought here is it's like, I actually don't even really enjoy the term mental health. I think we should just call it
Yeah.
brain health, because it's
Right.
physical health, right? It's like I can't say, I need to go exercise. But once I exercise, then I don't have to exercise anymore. Like I just want to work out enough over the next week so that I don't have to exercise the next month. It doesn't work that way, right? Like you you, you have to keep doing it to otherwise you'll gain those 5 pounds right back, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's just kind of it's part of being human. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that we're all talking about it now.
I am too. Yeah.
So I'm curious, because I can guarantee you that there's, maybe not many of our listeners, but I guarantee you that there are some listeners out there, and certainly some business practitioners that view this as, kind of a passing fad, right? Like, oh, mental health, this is the new hot thing in the workplace, and and it's, I can't wait for this to pass, or it's like when do we get back to quote normal? So, do you see us going back to a workplace where this isn't talked about as much, or do you think there's been enough of a shift now that this is just here to stay, and that organizations just need to start to figure it out? What do you think there, Heather?
Well, I don't think there's any going back. And I think normal is a bit of a myth. I think that what is emerging here is our humanity in the face of some very difficult circumstances. And that affects business. And, we have a choice. It can affect us in a good way, or we can try and fall back asleep. If we fall back asleep, we're going to get what we always had. But I think the future is calling for something different. And businesses have had to get creative and innovative. And it's been amazing to see some of the innovations and adaptations that companies have made through this crisis. And I don't think why would we want to stop that?
Personal comfort for
Yeah.
somebody that doesn't
Yeah.
feel comfortable, right? I think that's the
Okay.
answer.
Yeah.
I think that's why somebody wouldn't want to deal with it. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I
Yeah.
think, and if you think that, you think that the generation that is entering the workforce right now out of college, if you think they don't care about this, and oh, by the way, that's the future of your organization. If you're going to be around for more than 5 years, they're asking for this plus like 10x, right?
Yeah. I'm so grateful to them. I'm so grateful to them. I really am. First of all, because I can't see, we've left them something that's a bit of a challenge. And so I have compassion for what we've put into their hands, but also that they are demanding more out of their lives. Good for them.
Yeah.
Who wants to fall back asleep?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. And I think it's, when I came out of college, it was, everybody was angry at, Gen X was kind of middle management at that point. Everybody was angry at millennials. People are still angry at millennials, even though they're like, the old ones are in their 40s and they have mortgages and a bunch of kids and they're but now people are finally, frustrated with Gen Z. But I just feel like it's just the natural progression of our society that if you grew up with more than your parents had, you're going to expect to want to build a society like that for your kids. And, and you continue to ask for more and more. And I feel like that's kind of how we evolve, right? Isn't that kind of the point of society?
Right. I would say so. And I think if you're paying attention to human evolution, including your own, that's got to be good for business.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. So, and I agree with you in the statement as well that, I hope it doesn't change. I mean, I don't want to be, an HR person that says, oh, mental health is not something that mental health of my employees is not something that I care about. That's not right. That's not good. That's not a good leader. Right. And it's something that I think that if your employees are comfortable, being authentic and taking whatever resources you provide so that they can live healthy, happy lives with, and be productive in your work environment, that's a win-win, right? I mean, we should all aspire to that. So,
yeah. And remember the hubris aspect of this. Pretty much everybody I know and have run across in my life has had a mental health crisis of some sort or have been affected by somebody they love who's had one. And so being equipped with some tools and support to navigate through that in the best possible way, that's a good thing.
Absolutely. It's the old, it's the old saying, well, it never happened to me until it did. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything was fine until it wasn't. And I don't know anybody that has not had to deal with some level of mental health concerns in their family. Period. I don't know. I honestly can't think of anybody right now that hasn't had somebody, in their family that has had to deal with this. So like, this is a human condition. We need to understand it.
Yeah. I think what's changed is that we never used to feel that it was permitted to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like we were isolating ourselves and each other when we didn't have to.
Yeah. But going back to your, kind of your original point, and where to start is, I think that's also, that's a big benefit of having external support as well, whether that's a therapist, a coach, mentor, friends that you can talk about, challenges with. You've got to build that, that network and have that support function in your life, or it's pretty hard to work through these sorts of things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. This has just been a wonderful conversation. I think a really powerful conversation. I've made a couple notes. Certainly you've pushed me to think a little bit differently about some of the ways that I personally operate in my business. And so I thank you for that, Heather. I do want to shift gears, and I'm fascinated to hear your response to the Rebel HR flash round questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right, here we go. All right. Where does HR need to rebel?
Coaching is not remedial. Professionals use coaches. And they don't have to be formal coaches, but, people need mentor support. People need support.
I love that. And I think it's such, to go back to one of the points you made earlier, I think this is a really, really important point. So I want to say it again. We're not here to fix people, right? It's people are whole. And I think that's a really different way to approach versus, what some of the traditional approaches are towards employee development and leadership development. So I really appreciate that context. Question number 2, who should we be listening to?
Well, there are a few people that I think have a lot to say in this area. I think Brené Brown has all kinds of great things to contribute to this field of humanity and business. Dr. Gabor Mate, he's a therapist, he's a medical doctor, he's an author, he's a speaker, and he looks at human development through science and compassion. And he has some wonderful books, and he has written one called The Myth of Normal. I highly recommend it. Dick Schwartz, he's the father of internal family systems, and he's somebody I studied with and my colleagues have studied with, and he has brought a rather revolutionary approach to psychotherapy. And finally, Russ Hudson, he is somebody that my colleagues and I have studied with on the Enneagram. We never mentioned that on our call, but the Enneagram is a fantastic framework for building self-awareness and appreciation for our humanity.
Awesome. I know one of those, so I've got my homework to do for the
Good.
other 3. But I love the intersection of kind of the therapeutics, some of the scientific research, and then and we give us like a 1-minute overview of the Enneagram, because I think it's a really fascinating. I was looking at it, we just didn't get a chance to talk about it. So give us like the 5-cent like overview of what that's about.
Well, the Enneagram is a framework that illuminates 9 patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting that all human beings use to cope with life. And we always have one that becomes more dominant, particularly at times of stress. So it's a beautiful instrument to build self-awareness so that when we're getting gripped by that patterning, it gives us a chance to get free of it and again, return to wholeness. So I could say so much more, but that's it in a nutshell.
Well, if you want to learn more, we'll have a link to your website, and there's a link and there's a book and there's all sorts of, but I think it goes back to exactly what you discussed in the beginning, which is kind of that self-discovery, right? And that self-awareness, and, it kind of starts there, right?
Yeah. And an appreciation for the diversity of our fellow humans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Last question. How can our listeners connect with you and learn more?
Well, you can certainly listen. We have a podcast as well. It's called Being Human is Good for Business. And we have, we're on all of the various listening sites, podcast sites. You can also find us at our website, which is trilogyeffect.com.
Absolutely. And we'll have those links in the show notes. So open up your podcast player, check it out. Just really appreciate you being here today, Heather. I think some really great content. I appreciate the work you're doing out there and helping us all be a little bit more human.
Thank you very much.
All right. That does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.